One Hell of a Team by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 7, Madness Becomes Me. Isn't it remarkable how easily one word can change things? You told her to be selfish. She listened. Congratulations. Madness becomes me. Pyrrha glared in mildness melee. There was just something so freeing about it. No thoughts, no worries, just simple chaos in the courtyard. She didn't fight, she danced. Milo and Aqua were a whirl in her hands, whirling, cutting, parrying, and blocking as she raged back and forth, trusting her back to her teammates as she forged a path in the madness. Damn, but it felt good to have a team. Perhaps that was a bit of an understatement on Pyrrha's part. She'd long since had a partner in Naruto long before she came to Beacon, but she felt it worth saying regardless. Friends were one thing, but teammates were another. Naruto she could trust to watch her flank, and to a lesser extent Yang, no matter their rivalry, so she needn't fear much on that part. Weiss was something of an anomaly. Technically their team leader, she slotted in rather well in this morning madness, in that she'd promptly claimed the high ground for herself and made devastating use of it via her glyphs. At least she knew better to shout commands that would be similarly ignored. Pyrrha, on your left. That warning did not go unheeded. Ruby's scythe swept at Pyrrha's head from the side and caught it with a lacy swipe of her shield, the backswing of which sent the small girl twirling end over end before crashing into a fountain face first. Oh dear, in all fairness, she really hadn't meant to hit her that hard. She winced, little bubbles welled up from the water. Ruby was tough, really, and surely she'd be alright. I'm sorry. Vengeance for Ruby. And some mad woman with a hammer rushed her. Naruto fell upon them like a falling star, up and smashing them into the ground. Sorry, he patted her stunned forehead. Power of friendship really ain't the thing here. Nora groaned. Oh, pretty stars. A shadow fell over them. Pyrrha whirled and flung Aqua like a discus, only for her shield to pass through empty air. No, not air. It crashed through something, but it wasn't a person. Impossible. She'd glimpsed the girl with dark hair and golden eyes. So where had she? She had half an instinct to realize her peril before someone slammed a knee into her back. She'd never remembered who in the madness, and sent her stumbling away. Yang's gauntlet barked, and her would-be attacker went flying. She caught a flash of startled pink eyes and green clothes as they sprawled at her feet. There. She pivoted for a knockout blow, only to find another of them caught and bounced by a pair of glyphs, courtesy of Weiss. Oh, a stranger. Good. Easy pickings. A vicious kick sent her victim to her knees. From there, her hands snapped up, her semblance flared, and the weapon of her would-be attacker shot into the air, dragging its owner with it. Foolish. Really, sometimes one had to know when to drop their weapon and fight on. Hey, Nikos! She turned and planted a fist against her hip, mildly nonplussed to find a familiar face awaiting her. Not going to sneak up on me, Cardin? Nah. Her next opponent brandished his heavy mace with a lazy grin. No fun that way. Besides, he looked past her, wincing a little as Naruto blasted Melanie and Milsha into the air. I'd get my ass kicked for it. True. So you'd rather take your lumps the hard way? He ducked a flailing body and stormed forward. Sounds like that. She settled into a loose stance and moved to meet him, shield raised before her face. Cardin Winchester wasn't the same bully he'd been before the Leaf Gym. He'd had that mean streak beaten out of him and come out the better for it. Minato would allow nothing less. Under his tutelage, you became your best self, or... No, wait, he really didn't let anyone quit these days, so she suspected the point was moot, but even he had his pride. I'll get you this time, he swore. Green eyes flashed as she dove in. We'll see. Sparks flew as her spear skittered off the jagged face of his mace. Cardin fought well, honorably well. No flourishes or stupid swordsmanship here. He gave ground slowly but reliably, retreating towards higher ground as she pressed him. Points for that. He knew he couldn't hope to match her in sheer speed, but then again, he didn't have to. A single swipe of that mace could shatter aura in an instant, even break bones if one wasn't careful. Unfortunately, his weapon wasn't very bit a one tricky pony. For all of his strength, it really didn't matter so long as he didn't hit you. Their weapons clashed. Pyrrha moved to sweep his legs, and paused when she saw his smile. A hand reached around, ignoring the blade grating against his skin, to grab her wrist. She hacked into it. She hacked in it a snarl, but his grin only grew. With neither word nor warning, that massive mace lost the wide flanks at the edge as its bulk folded inward, gears clinking and whirling as it gave birth to an entirely new weapon. Too late, she realized her mistake as she found herself staring down at the barrel of a cannon. Rule number 1 of the Leaf Gym: adapt, adapt, adapt. Carden had adapted. Gotcha! Her body moved of its own accord. Her heel soared upright and nailed him in the groin. Carden folded like a wet paper bag. Pyrrha! What the hell? I'm sorry, her face colored. It was instinct. And Pyrrha stepped over his crumbling form of her defeated adversary aside, hoping no one had seen that, just as well, because water erupted from the fountain behind her as Ruby came up swinging and soaking wet. Silver Eyes promised murder. Vengeance will be mine! And Pyrrha dove to meet her, laughing. Perhaps this wouldn't be so bad after all. She moved to meet the Raven Reaper, grinning from ear to ear. Do your best. In the days that followed, team weapons settled in rather nicely. At least Naruto believes they were. Oh, there was a bit of teething problems at first, as there were in all things, but in good time, the kings began to work themselves out for the most part. Lunch proved a little different. That what was once meant to be a simple meal soon became a torrid affair that few would forget. 4 tablets were dragged across the room, crammed together for both team, 2 to each side. Weapon and Reverb sat on one side, while Cardinal and Juniper on the left. It made for a mad little hour, but it was strangely wholesome all the same. Naruto rather liked it. Just about all his old friends were here, with some new ones to boot. All sorts of juicy gossip to be had here. Today was no exception. Seriously, it's no fair. Ruby buried her face in her hands. We trained at the same gym. Accusing Silver Eyes narrowed upon them. Why does our team always lose to yours? Her hand slammed down on the table, all but jolting her plate. Even Cardinal does better than us. Carden lazily flipped her off across the table. You're also 2 years younger than us, so... It was an old argument by now, one Naruto felt only a little chagrined for. Most teams had found their groove by now, while Reverb yet struggled. He suspected it made sense. Ruby was still struggling, while the idea that she should be leader of anything, and when you had 2 recluses and a Nora on your team, well, that was a volatile combination to begin with. She'd come into her own soon. He hoped she had too. He had faith in her, and so he scratched the back of his head. You'll get there. Trust me, it's just a matter of cohesion, Weiss interjected, lifting her chin and preening with like a proud peacock. Well, that and 2 championship fighters. Push-ups, sit-ups, and plenty of juice, Pyrrha chimed in. I'm not sorry. Holy crap, Yang coughed. Pyrrha just made a joke. Is the world ending? I mean, she backtracked at her siblings' glower. Sorry, sis, that's just how it is. Boo! The little Reaper whipped a piece of toast off of her sibling's head. You suck! Yang caught it with her teeth and munched happily. Weiss raised a hand as they ate. So John and Neil are together? Nora swallowed another bite of her pancakes. Oh yeah, there's a story there. Now that she mentioned it, they'd been wondering about that. Yeah, Naruto grinned around a muffled muffin. You and Neil, how did that happen? Keen Blue Eyes found John. Come on, spill. Who made the first move? Melanie and Milsha exchanged the knowing look. Neither. There was a silence. What do you mean, neither? His fellow blonde turned red. Well, Pyrrha leaned in on her elbows, rather curious herself. John looked left, John looked right. John realized all eyes were on him, and similarly that he'd been had. His lips parted and were suddenly silenced as a hand came up over John's mouth. Firm fingers clamped down hard and held fast, holding the words at bay. He turned a baffled blink on Neil. Ah, he sulked. I can't tell them. She shook her head fiercely and lowered her head. Blake found her voice next. She can't talk. Then how do you two? Scrolls and body language. A rueful grin tugged at John's mouth. Lots of body language. All eyes turned to Neil, who'd somehow managed to squirrel away another gallon of ice cream in the last 5 seconds. When nobody was looking, she flashed to them a thumbs up. Cardin clapped him on the back. And that a boy? Cardin. Ow. Well, Weiss stood with a frown. This has been bracing. Well, but we have a schedule to keep and homework to do. The rest of Team Weapon blanched. Yang frowned. Are you sure we can't skip those extra lessons? Weiss bristled at that. Certainly not. No privacy these days for them. Naruto groaned. Ugh. Things finally reached a head in Port's class 3 days later. Well, that was when Naruto finally noticed it, if only because Pyrrha couldn't seem to sit still. She just kept squirming. In hindsight, it was a miracle he'd missed it. She was usually so calm in class, so composed, careful never one to let the mask fall anywhere safe when they were alone, which they hadn't been for at least 2 weeks now. Tap. Her elbow nudged his side, a desperate cry for attention. Naruto flicked a quick glance at her so-called teacher, found Port all but engrossed in one of his stories, and looked back at her way again. You all right? Pyrrha didn't answer, not with proper words at least. She slid a folded note across the desk to him. He took it and unwrapped it in an instant. A lone line awaited him. Rooftop tonight? Strange. Yang tried to lean over his shoulder and peek, to no avail. Not trusting himself to a note with Yang and Weiss watching, Naruto scooted a bit closer. His hip brushed hers, and Pyrrha made a little noise of surprised pleasure. Her lips pursed, not quite understanding until he raised his left hand and made a quick gesture with his fingers. Training? He flicked 2 fingers back and forth, using old code they concocted as children. She recognized it at once and suddenly signed back, eyes gone half-lidded. Of a sort. Well, that didn't allay his suspicions. She was definitely up to something. Weiss noticed. What are you two doing? As she hissed, he'll notice. Naruto waved her down and sighed once more. Team? Pyrrha's pale face turned a lovely shade of red. No. Her motion was stiff, almost choppy. Alone? Sure, he nodded. He didn't see the harm in it. She reached across and hooked her pinky finger in his. Remember, you promised? Yep. Naruto mirrored her smile. What was the harm in it? Wasn't like they were doing anything wrong. Say what you would about Beacon and its madness, but the nightlife was strangely peaceful. Few were out near midnight, and with most of the training facilities housed indoors, Naruto let her drag him up the last flight of stairs. All right, he released her and turned to face her fully. We're here. Why did you want to train on the roof? Pyrrha closed the door behind them and did something with her semblance. He knew, if only because he heard the handle click, despite lacking a lock. All right, whatever it was, she didn't want to be disturbed, and had she wedged her shield in the latch? All right, now, she was starting to make him a little nervous. Privacy? An alarm went off in the back of his head. Naruto ignored it, not quite comprehending what she was up to. Well, he planted both hands in his pockets. We've got it now. Pyrrha gave him a strange look. We certainly do. She sauntered forward, hips swaying as she kicked off her shoes. Naruto frowned. Wait, her skirt hit him in the face. Neat. His mind chirped. Black lace. There was something new about her smile. It was tiny and shy, yet for all that, he glimpsed something new there, something that had been simmering for the last few days now. He knew that look, or perhaps it would be better to say he recognized it. He'd seen it a time or two when she was stressed, when things weren't going her way, when he'd missed no shortage of hints. Hunger. All right, just calm down. He collapsed his weapon and raised the hand. I know, it's been a bit, but her eyes flashed as she reached out and reeled him in. No. She was quite close now. Terribly close, really. She stepped in with a quiet sigh, looped her arms around his neck, and fastened her mouth to his. A jolt shot through Naruto. Her lips were warm and soft, tasting faintly of berries and sunshine, so much so that he found himself leaning into her embrace despite his earlier reservations. She yielded to him with a pleased hum, reaching around to guide his arms onto hers. She pulled away first. It's been so noisy these past few days. Her voice was a breathy whisper as she pulled away. I can't take it anymore. Small wonder she'd been angsty lately. He grabbed her by the waist, to which she made a pleased noise and dove in again. Her legs swept his, and she rode him down to the roof. Aura cushioned the impact. Even if it hadn't, he surely wouldn't have felt it in such a state. His mind had already fizzled out, and his attention was firmly elsewhere. Pyrrha sat atop his chest, legs splayed, green eyes bored into blue. Don't move. Nimble fingers reached up with infuriating slowness, dancing across the buttons of her blouse, a tantalizing expanse of pale creamy skin greeting his eyes as her bosom was freed. Black lace there too. There was a wild glazed look to her green eyes now, and he all but lost himself in them. He leaned up to kiss her as her hips ground against his. She reached down, fumbling with the buttons of his jacket, and behind them the door to the roof rattled. Pyrrha absolutely hissed. "I swear," she sang with fox sweetness, "if someone opens that door, I'm going to throw them off the roof." The rattling ceased, and they heard footsteps repeating rapidly. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Naruto sniggered. Pyrrha snorted, covered her mouth to hide her smile. Before long, they were both hopelessly lost in laughter, doubling over as they clutched at themselves and cackled. Naruto finally subsided with a sigh. "You sure about this?" he drawled. "This ain't something you can take back." She leaned down and kissed him again, sweetly this time, tongue tickling at his lips. Her forehead touched his, bright hair tickling his face. "Does that answer your question?" "Yep." The hell was he waiting for again? Probably just as well too, because she lost patience with his clothes and started tearing. His buttons and most of his jacket flew away with a shred of fabric, and soon enough his trousers joined them. He took the tie that bound her hair in recompense, and her hair spilled down over her shoulders. "Touch me," she begged. "No interruptions this time." His hand moved to cup her bare breasts, and she jolted, sucking air in between her teeth. "Cold hands," she gasped out the words. He nearly withdrew. "Sorry." She tilted her neck back, gasping softly. "I didn't say stop." He leaned up to kiss her again at that, twisting his hips and rolled. She had half an instinct to cling to him before she wound up, sprawled beneath him. Scarlet tresses sprawled against the ground beneath her like a bloody halo, further highlighting her paler skin and striking green eyes. Chest-heaving, eyes half-lidded, she gazed up at him for a long moment, and then, "Thank you." Naruto tilted. "What?" Her eyes began to water. "Oi." He reached down, cupping her face. "Why are you crying?" "Because." She sniffled and snickered in the same instant, producing a strange sound caught somewhere between a sigh and a sob. Because I'm happy." Her hands threaded with his. "Thank you for fighting me that day." She laid a kiss on his interlaced fingers. "Thank you for telling me to be selfish. Thank you for loving me." An awful feeling stirred in his chest. "This is starting to sound like a goodbye, you know." "No." Her eyes flashed. "Never. I just can't help myself. Sometimes I wake up and wonder if this is all a dream, if it's even real." His heart skipped a beat. "Of course it's real. But what if it isn't?" "Nope." He swatted her on the nose. "All right, I won't argue." She reached up and pulled him down to her nose, nuzzling her nose against his. "I'm so glad I met you. Thank you for saving me." "Saved you?" She smiled. "It sounds strange, doesn't it? Still, I can't help but feel that you did." There were no more words after that. The last of their clothes fell away, and she began to move against him. Her skin was soft as satin under his hands. His palms came up under her rear and cupped it. It held her fast as he only could. Neither of them knew what they were doing. Neither cared. Together, they fell into carnal bliss. "Previews?" "Really?" Weiss looked away. "Have you no shame?" "Nope." Minato took on his mask. "All right then. Time for work." "So," Yang grinned. "You too, Pyrrha whipped a pillow at her and knocked her off the bed. "Training, please." Naruto looked down at Ruby, frowned. Distantly he heard her words, but his brain didn't quite catch up. "It's a weekend. Why are you awake this early?" "I'll buy you ramen for a month." "Sold." Naruto whistled. "Did I ever mention how much I love you?" She shivered a little. "Could you say it again?" "Such a glutton." End of chapter 7.